So the spear is, at least in my personal opinion, probably one of the coolest support weapons in all of Helldivers. I mean, you cannot tell me that you look at a javelin type missile launcher that just dishes out a lot of damage, and like, you cannot tell me that that's not fucking cool. It just kind of has a bit of a problem. That problem being that it just has a really hard time competing with all of the other anti-tank weapons. And that it just kind of doesn't really compete. The problem with the spear is that it just kind of tends to be unreliable when it comes to hitting and killing larger targets due to it always attacking from the top. It's unreliable when it comes to locking onto things that are like sort of like covered by like trees, or like even if there's just a fence, you will have a hard time locking onto something like a fabricator, which is really fucking stupid. It also has a pretty low ammo capacity, though that was recently increased by 1 from 4 shots in total, counting the 1 in the missile launcher too, to now 5 in total. It is also rather ineffective when it comes to close range. If you, for example, use a recoilless, you can just face blast whatever is trying to intrude into your personal space. Well, that is a little hard to do with the spear. It also can't necessarily be used at too long range, with it having a max range of 300 meters. It therefore kind of struggles to compete with things like the previous mentioned recoilless rifle, because with it you can hit weak spots, which means that mostly all of the larger enemies, including factory stars and bile titans, can be decently reliably one-shotted. It also, at least in theory, kind of has more range, since you can theoretically snipe a command bunker over across the map, though the 300 meter range of the spear is not exactly a bad thing. It is also more reliable when it comes to hitting things like fabricators or similar, as, you know, those stupid fucking fences won't get in your way. It also just in general has more ammo, with it having, I think, like a total of 6, 1 in the launcher, 5 in the back, and it also can be used at close range, heck, even point blank, as previously mentioned. So, how do we fix this? Well, granted, the recent buff with the spear receiving 1 more shot actually kind of made it a bit better, and in recent times I've actually gotten pretty used to the spear. However, I feel like the best way of kind of trying to buffing the spear wouldn't necessarily be to try and put it on par with the recoilless rifle, which would be sort of a little bit impossible. The problem is that more or less all of the things that make the spear, well, the spear, are also sort of the things that kind of keep it down, like the lock-on, like the, okay, not necessarily the low ammo, but yeah, mostly the lock-on, which with its top attacks kind of tends to make it a little unreliable against heavier enemies. So instead of trying to put it on par with the recoilless, what we are going to do is that we're going to create a weapon that's almost a little OP, but is pretty much immediately nerfed by its weaknesses as a lock-on weapon and its low ammo capacity. Though, as a little heads up, this whole concept was created with the spear's low ammo capacity in mind, it only having 4 shots, with only 3 actually being on the backpack. So the first thing that I think kind of would really make the spear more interesting is if we increase sort of the value of the rockets that the spear has. Again, this whole concept was created with the spear only having 4 rockets. But yeah, the idea would basically to give it a major damage buff. Now, it usually has 4,000 damage, which is already pretty good. It kind of can reliably kill some stuff. But again, when it comes to some of the more heavy hitters, like Bile Titans or Factory Starters, it very much struggles. Sometimes you can, like, one-tap a Bile Titan if you, like, shoot it from the front, but it's kind of inconsistent, unfortunately. So you might think to yourself, okay, how much damage are we gonna add? Are we gonna take it up from, like, 4,000 to, like, 4,500? 5,000? 6,000? Well, my idea would be to go from 4,000 damage to either 6,500 or, which I would very much prefer, 7,500 to get some better breakpoints and kill especially super heavy enemies more consistently. Breakpoints at 7,500 damage would be Bile Titans, including the new Spore Burst versions, would be 1-shot. Factory Striders would be reliably 2-shot. Leviathans would also be 2-shot. High Flood Stern Plates, aka those like armor plates that High Floors have at the front that you have to destroy before you get to the meaty flesh, also would be 2 shots. And yes, you can log onto them, I checked that. Dragon Roaches, I think, were already 1-shot anyway, so yeah, that wouldn't really change a lot. Vox Engines would be 2-shot, which I think would be really helpful. And just for the sake of it, I also put Flesh Mobs in here. They would also be 1-shot. This wouldn't really change any like breakpoints for structures, as most of the structures that I could think of off the top of my head, you can already pretty much 1-shot with the Spear or the Recoilless. Heck, I even checked those like infested Terminate towers on some of the city missions if you could log onto them, which unfortunately you can't, but not much of a loss. However, that isn't necessarily the only change I would make. The general idea of like the Spear's damage buff would be to kind of shift its anti-tank role a bit, with the idea being that the Recoilless excels at killing hulks, you know, killing your tanks, chargers, harvesters, you know, all the heavy enemies, and you know, it excels at that, you know. You can like even blast them straight in the face if they come closer. It has a lot more ammo, is a bit more versatile. That's kind of the idea with the Recoilless. You can kill the super heavy enemies like Factory Striders or Bile Titans, and you can kill them quickly, oftentimes with 1 shot, but it takes a bit more effort. You kind of have to get a bit into their danger zones. That being right in front of their face, where the Factory Strider has 2 very revved up miniguns, and where the Bile Titan likes to vomit. So it's kind of a bit of a risk-reward thing going in with the Recoilless to try and kill a heavy hitter. However, on the other hand, the Spear is kind of the opposite side of that spectrum. The Spear would excel at killing things like Bile Titans or Factory Striders or just in general the larger targets, but can still be used for things like killing a Hulk, killing a War Strider, killing a Charger, Impaler, or a Harvester. It does come at the negative that, well, you're taking up valuable ammo and that it, you know, can't face blast those fuckers if necessary, but that's kind of the point. The Recoilless excels at the regular heavy enemies, while the Spear would excel at killing the super heavy enemies. However, that wouldn't be my only suggestion on how to change the Spear, since I feel like that wouldn't necessarily be enough. So here's another thing that I think would be really fun to tag on, a fun little secondary fire mode. Now the first thing that I thought of would be a sort of airburst mode, less in the sense of the airburst rocket launcher, but more in the sense of the orbital airburst, where you kind of fire and it just releases that airburst downwards, again similar to the orbital airburst. But that would kind of not really work, since essentially you're just tacking a additional roll onto the weapon, which wouldn't really make it better, especially because of its bad ammo economy. So that wouldn't really work, I feel like. Instead, what I came up with is a secondary fire mode that I like to call scattershot. Now, the way a scattershot works is pretty easy. Just as you would do usually with the Spear, you lock onto an enemy, let's say for example a Hulk. The rocket flies up, but at its apex, it actually splits up into 3 different rockets. One rocket always hits the targeted enemy, while the other 2, similar to, for example, the Eagle or rocket pods, targets the next 2 biggest enemies. Which would be really cool, because especially on higher difficulties, sometimes you have a POI that for some reason is guarded by 3 fucking Hulks. For reasons, I guess. So this sort of scattershot would be really handy. It would also just in general, I feel like, increase the value of these rockets. As, you know, you could use a single rocket to kill one Hulk, or you could save that rocket and use it to kill, for example, 3 fucking Hulks. The idea would be for it to get like round about like 3000 ballistic damage, which means that breakpoints would include chargers, Hulks, tanks, also the tank towers, just in general all the tanks I think. It would also include charger behemoths, harvesters, the viracitators, or however the fuck you pronounce that, and the gatekeepers. This would however not include warstriders, as they have a bit too much HP. It also wouldn't include dropships, warp ships, or impalers, as the latter has 4000 HP and all the others have 3500. Theoretically, you could up the damage by like 300, which would mean that if the top attack hits a warstrider, it would still kill them without destroying dropships or warp ships. Since I feel like that would be a little overkill if you could use the spear to destroy like 3 dropships in one go. I feel like that would be a little overkill, though I guess if the weapon doesn't perform as well, you could still change that. But I feel like it's decent enough for that scatter shot to work with only 3000 damage. But yeah, that would kind of be the idea for the scatter shot. So yeah, that is kind of my rework idea for the spear. This is kind of the first time I do a video like this, so if there's any feedback you want to give, I'm always ready to listen. Also, I'm in general curious when it comes to game design, so if there are any like video game developers or similar who watch this video and also have like feedback on my like design idea slash concept, feel free to reach out to me and I don't know, tell me why I'm stupid, or tell me why I'm smart, or anything in between. Also, on the off chance that an actual Arrowhead developer sees this, I'd be especially interested in their opinion, because at the end of the day, every developer or development studio kind of like has their own vision for like what a game should look like. So just because I come up with like an idea and think, hey, that's a cool thing you could integrate, that obviously doesn't automatically mean that developers agree with it and that it fits their vision and their idea for the game. So yeah, I'd be really curious. But that's it for this video. Hope you all have a wonderful time, and yeah, happy gaming!